Hello and welcome to this post-KubeCon CloudNativeCon 2025 follow-up. I'm Rob Strechay and today we're going to talk about infrastructure as code and what happened at KubeCon CloudNativeCon back in Atlanta. To help me do this, I'm really excited to be joined by Dimitri Vlachos, who's the CMO of Spacelift. Welcome on board, Dimitri.
Great to be here, Rob.
Again, we saw each other a whole bunch, but we were running in different directions a lot of the week, except on day zero, and we'll get to that in a minute. But can you, start by going into kind of the origin story for Spacelift? Because I think it's really intriguing and important about how this community has really been built out.
Sure. So one of our co-founders, Marcin, our technical co-founder, head of R&D, he was, after a career at Facebook and Google, running large kind of SRE and DevOps groups in various different roles, he was doing some contracting and he was helping a lot of companies and realizing that, the way they were kind of managing their infrastructure with IaC, with Terraform, like there had to be a bigger way when you really want to scale this. And so he actually started to build some tools as a contractor to help organizations with that. And that really led into the idea of Spacelift and starting to productize that and creating a real, offering that could help people scale their infrastructure as code operations to both have the speed they need to deliver infrastructure, but the control they needed to really be able to have the governance and security behind the scenes of what they needed for infrastructure. So that's kind of the origin story of Spacelift.
Yeah, I think, again, it's when you start to look at how people are bringing together cloud native applications and infrastructure and really trying to do it repeatably, having been at one of the hyperscalers and knowing that, there's definitely a different levels of skill that people have. And one of the major things that people talk about is really, ClickOps versus infrastructure as code. What do you see as the major differences as you're out there talking to customers?
So, if you step back and say, okay, cloud operations, cloud infrastructure started, and the original people started deploying by going into consoles of the different cloud providers. Really, at the time when this really began, it was kind of, AWS. Now you've got other offerings, but, ClickOps is great. You go in, you can, through a portal, to click what you want, deploy it. And that's great for experimenting and early on, but you have no visibility of what's been deployed centrally. You don't understand who's doing it in a lot of ways. It's hard to, replicate and redo things like that. So it's also understand like what's intended to be there, what's not intended to be there. So ClickOps is great for kind of, the basics beginnings. But if you're really going to build a program, that's where IaC and GitOps come together, where you come into play, where you can now have a way to repeatedly deploy. You have structure of what you expect to be deployed. You can compare that to, what's been deployed in state files. You've got the visibility. So those are the major differences in terms of ClickOps, which has essentially no real process around it. And then GitOps, which brings code-like process and GitOps operations where you've got, pull requests and you've got a code base you've checked into that describes your infrastructure. So those are really the differences of one's not a lot of structure, one's highly structured, a lot of ceremony, and some could say too much for certain use cases. That is how we view the difference between kind of ClickOps and GitOps and IaC.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, again, you guys had a really interesting announcement back a couple weeks ago, with that understanding of what you just went through between ClickOps and infrastructure as code and GitOps, you guys came out with Spacelift Intent. How is that helping bridge kind of that gap between those two worlds?
So what we found, what is the impact of that gap, right? That's really what we're talking about. And we see a couple of main things, the impact of that gap. One, when developers want to deploy stuff very quickly for tests or non-production or experiments or even non-critical applications, the overhead of GitOps and IaC can be quite heavy, right? You have to do all this process. You have to do a pull request. You have to write the code. You have to go through these iterations. The feedback loop can be slow. And so while we love IaC and GitOps, and we've built a lot of our business around helping companies scale that, there's certain use cases where it's overkill. There's too much ceremony. And so we introduced Intent, which is a way of now, instead of having to go through all of this rigor of IaC and writing code and GitOps operations, we basically take we've used kind of AI as an approach to do this. So we allow developers or organizations in general, whether it's lower skilled DevOps teams or developers, they can connect right to an MCP server that we've developed, the Intent MCP server. They're able to now, just in plain English or whatever language they're using, they can describe what they want deployed, and basically Intent will go deploy that for them. And so you get the speed, if you will, kind of that ClickOps, not a lot of ceremony, but behind the scenes, you as a DevOps or a platform team to get to set a bunch of policy behind the scenes so that whatever agent, whatever type of LLM your developers or DevOps teams are using, you have control of what it can do. So it puts guardrails and brings a level of trust around your AI as it's deploying infrastructure. So that's really what we introduced. And it's a way to allow developers who want to deploy quickly. We've got a lot of interest actually from some companies that are looking at, hey, we've got pockets of organizations that are very advanced when it comes to infrastructure as code. Then we've got other pockets of teams that are just starting their cloud journey, and they don't want to have to learn all the overhead of IaC, of Terraform. They want to kind of start using Intent for more of their, baseline infrastructure deployment. So it's been really interesting to see the reaction. We really view this as a really good option to sit side by side with infrastructure as code. We don't believe, and we're not proposing that infrastructure as code and GitOps should be thrown away. We believe IaC and GitOps is really critical for critical infrastructure, for known paths, for applications that are absolutely, central to you, but for prototyping, for rapid deployment, rapid testing, Intent is a perfect fit. So that's really what we announced and what we've seen with Intent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes total sense for those use cases to be very complementary to each other, not, in opposition from that perspective. I think all of this together definitely brings it home for organizations that want to move fast, but have to have those guardrails in place. Is that what you're seeing? Is this helps them keep those guardrails and really move fast in that prototyping phase and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's what, we're seeing. If you look at AI and infrastructure, there's a couple of approaches. One is, hey, we're going to help you write faster IaC code, right? But then you have to put it through your same GitOps operation. And we're also seeing people have a real trust issue with, hey, how am I going to use AI in my infrastructure? I don't want to let it go hog wild. I don't want to let it run in my critical infrastructure. Where does it make, but I know it's going to come and I know I need to adapt. And so this is where Intent, you allow AI to be used to deploy parts of your infrastructure, but you have a lot of control over it as a centralized DevOps and platform team. And it's almost behind the scenes. The people connecting their LLM to our Intent server don't even know these policies are there until they try to do something that's blocked. Then they're kind of told, oh, you can't do that. And, and the LLM can learn, well, what can I do? And then deploy what's needed. I think one other thing that's important to understand, Rob, is, we're bypassing code when it comes to Intent. So it's not just about writing code faster, IaC code. We're basically taking the approach of, there's certain cases where you don't need code. So what we're doing is going directly to the actual APIs, the providers, and skipping the intermediate step of creating code. So I think those are the things that people are kind of, interesting. I have the guardrails. I'm able to go faster when I need. I can start to trust AI with control for certain parts of my infrastructure. So that's what we're hearing from a lot of people.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think, again, both of us were down in Atlanta for KubeCon CloudNativeCon. What did you find interesting in the day zero events, particularly around OpenTofu? I think I didn't make it there, but I know you guys were big and very involved in there.
So with OpenTofu, I think OpenTofu is starting to reach a very different level of use and acceptance in the industry. I think it's become more and more, we see a lot of people converting to it. I think it was the biggest day in terms, even though KubeCon overall, the attendance was down a little, I think a lot because of the travel restrictions and what have you, but the OpenTofu day was quite packed. The sponsors continue to increase. And the discussion now not only is about what is OpenTofu doing differently than, Terraform, it's also about, well, how are people deploying it? Where is it being deployed? We've seen Fidelity, Oracle, Cisco, like some major names start to adopt this and offer it as a major side-by-side offering with other types of IaC flavors they're supporting in their infrastructure. So I think OpenTofu is just starting to reach more and more of that trust and acceptance as a real viable IaC option in the market.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there was a lot of buzz about it, and I think more buzz than there was in Salt Lake a year ago. And I think it's going to continue to increase as people become more involved in it, because I think a lot of it is, like you said, it's not either or, it's an and piece with OpenTofu. But also, I was excited. I got to be with you guys at IaCConf Connect on Monday night down there. It was a great in-person event, the first in-person event for IaCConf. So kind of helped from the perspective, I was up moderating the panel. You were out in the crowd there. I had great conversations there before and after the moderating the panel, but kind of what was your perspective on the community actually coming together and what you've seen as it's grown?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, IaCConf is something, we started as the sponsor and in May. And let me just back up and say, why do we start IaCConf? When you look at this market, infrastructure as code, there's not really a conference, an area where people can come together in a very open, non-vendor, heavy environment that is talking about infrastructure as code, from best practices, beginners, advanced use cases, what's coming, what's on the forefront. And so we started IaCConf in May. We are the sponsors, but there's very limited Spacelift promotion at all. It's not a Spacelift event. It's really a community event. We had over 3,000 people register. It was a virtual event in May, and we had over 2,000 attend. And some of the follow-up feedback was people wanted two things. They wanted spotlight events, like a particular topic to do a more focused event on. And we did our first one of those in August on security. And then the other thing people really wanted was they want to meet face-to-face. And so IaCConf Connect came out of that. And so we do them side by side, in this case, KubeCon. And we had over 200 people register. We had over 75, 80 attend, which was, kind of our target, which was great, especially given everything that was happening with travel. And it was the first night. And the topic of that panel was AI. And so you moderated. We had some really interesting different participants. We had, Ned in the cloud, right? We had a gentleman who was just going through an interview process of had left a job and took some time and then was interviewing with a bunch of companies to be a DevOps leader, and his perspective on what AI looks like in terms of what people were asking during his interview. So it was a really interesting panel. And I think on the floor, kind of in the room, it was really great just to hear people having a venue to go talk and understand what they're working on, what they're not working on. And what's really interesting is just the breakdown of the audience we typically have. It's pretty well split. We ask people during these events, your skill level at IaC, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and it's pretty evenly split, which is great to see. And we had a number of people volunteer to host their own IaCConf Connect. So that's great to see that community really start to continue to grow. We've got our next IaCConf Spotlight in January, on AI. You can see that's a topic people really want to talk about. So it felt really good to see in-person energy in a world that is so virtual today. As you know, Rob, you were there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was great, and I know you guys recorded it as well, the panel, and I would say to people, go back and watch the panel, because to Dimitri's point, it was very much non-vendor specific. It was very much about how are people dealing with people coming from more the developer down towards infrastructure, and the people coming from infrastructure up towards the developer. It was a great. I mean, we actually had to cut off questions, which was crazy and awesome there. But, you know, as you look forward, and we keep going, because I think that's going to be a great thing, but, you know, what do you see as the future for Spacelift as you move forward? And what do you hope when we're together next year again, and, you know, actually back in Salt Lake, that's where it's going to be next year. Again, it's probably the same weather, given how cold it was.
That was crazy.
I thought it was going to snow there the one day. It was 29 degrees. It was like, whatever. But anyway, so when we're in Salt Lake, what do you hope to say about Spacelift, and what progress you've made over the course of the year here?
So I think when I look at next year, I think a couple things. One, the whole idea of intent and IaC, we really see this idea of a two-prong deployment model, where you can use AI-based intent when it makes sense. You use IaC and GitOps when it makes sense. So when I look forward, I would look forward to kind of seeing people adopting AI in some way in infrastructure to help speed deployment, have DevOps teams focus on the more critical infrastructure rather than be distracted by use cases where they don't need their expertise, and allows the DevOps teams to move faster. So that's one piece I would hope comes to fruition. We'll see. The other is with IaCConf, the continued building of that community, another connect there we will do it in Salt Lake City. We're going to do one at Amsterdam. So I think the continued building of that community, which is really important to us as Spacelift. And then finally, the other component of intent we didn't talk about, that is, it is open source. So there's an open source version of intent. And so we really see, we want to see that community build over the next year as well. So those, I think, are the things, my wish list for next year would be those, if you will.
I love it. If people want to get more involved with IaCConf, where should they go and check it out?
They can just go to IaCConf.com and learn all about it. You can see all of the recordings from prior events, both in person and the panel that we had. The panel isn't quite up yet. It will be up in the next few days. But IaCConf.com, you can go and see all our past events, register for current events. We have our CFP open for our next spotlight, which is in January on AI. So if you have a good talk you want to submit, please go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'll be there in Amsterdam and in Salt Lake, so can't wait to be there. And, thanks for coming on, Dimitri. This has been great.
Thank you, Rob. Always great to talk to you.
And thank you for watching this post-KubeCon CloudNativeCon 2025 episode on Infrastructure as Code on theCUBE, the leader in tech analysis and news. Stay tuned.